Hello, Merry Christmas to anyone who celebrates it. I realise the sun's going to go down over the course of this video, so hopefully it doesn't mess up the exposure too much, but I wanted to make something that kind of looked dynamic, lighting-wise. But today I'm here to ask the question in the title, which is why doesn't English have a... Well, so how do you say Ich heiße in English? So if you've learnt German, you'll know that a sort of normal way to introduce yourself is by saying Ich heiße and then your name, so Ich heiße Simon. And although obviously English does have perfectly good ways of saying this, and the title's a bit clickbaity, like the proper way of saying that in English is I'm Simon or my name's Simon. There's no mystery there really. What I really want to address with this video is why English doesn't have a single verb expressing that concept of being named something. So in German, the phrase Ich heiße means I, and then a verb meaning am called, and then your name. Whereas in English, you have to use several words to express that concept. So the infinitive form of that verb in German, the form you'd find in a dictionary, is heißen. And it goes sort of Ich heiße, du heißt, sie es heißt, wir heißen. So I am called, you are called, he, she, it is called, and we are called. And other Germanic languages have an equivalent of this verb that means to be called. So I think in Icelandic it would be Ich heiti. My Icelandic pronunciation is not that good. In Norwegian you have Jeg heter. And these all mean the same thing. They're a kind of a single verb expressing the concept of being named something. And in fact, Old English did have a word that's cognate with these words in the other Germanic languages, which was hartan in the infinitive form, so the form you'd find in a dictionary. And the way you'd use that verb in the first person singular is by saying Ich hate. Now, the thing is, hartan seems to have mostly meant to call someone something. So Ich hate means I call, as in I call someone else something, rather than I call, I am called something. But there was a sort of passive form of this verb, and the only difference between the first person singular normal form hate and the first person singular passive form was that the passive form had a geminate consonant, so the t was held for longer. So it's the difference between hate and hate, which is a difference that is kind of difficult to hear from the perspective of a modern English speaker, because this lengthening of consonants doesn't really happen in English, or it's not important in modern English. It's not phonemic. It doesn't make the difference between words. Let's just check my focus is still on despite the slight change in lighting. Now, I'll go a little bit more into the history of the word hartan later in the video, but for now I want to bring up an interesting sort of parallel that I've noticed with something that's happening in modern English. So this is where a verb that expresses a single concept falling out of favour and being replaced with a string of several words that express the same concept. So think about, oh, there's a robin right there. That's going to run away if I try and take a picture of it. Maybe I can try with my phone. Oh, there it is, just behind the camera. I wonder if this will mess up my audio. Hello, little robin. They're very friendly. I think they follow larger animals around and pick up the sort of insects that they kick up as they're walking, so they don't mind being around big mammals like me. Different from American robins, which are more kind of thrush-like. This is pretty small, maybe the size of my hand. That's gone now. is my audio recording still happening? Yes, it is. Hopefully that's not messed it up too much. But yeah, so in the same way as the expression Ich heiße, which makes use of one single verb, was replaced with I am called, or my name is. More recently, in the speech of younger English speakers across a lot of dialects, to say is being replaced with the multi-word phrase to be like. So if you think about how people, when they're describing dialogue, when they're recounting dialogue, they might say, and then I was like this, and then he was like, quote, rather than saying, and I said this and he said that. And this isn't the first time that to say has been replaced with a multi-word construction. So I mentioned when me and my friend Tom were doing the 1960s conversation video that somebody had commented that in the 1960s in southeastern Britain it was common to describe dialogue in a way like, and then I turned round and said, and he turned round and said, or I come back with and he come back with, which kind of shows the back and forth of dialogue. So yeah, that's an example of how a single verb might be replaced with a multi-word phrase. The Old English form of the word hartan isn't surprising. All the other Germanic languages have this initial h, and where you find I in German and a in Dutch and a in Icelandic, you very regularly find r in Old English, so this vowel isn't too surprising. Most of the languages have t in this word apart from German, which has undergone a regular sound change where t has changed into s, and un is just the normal infinitive suffix for verbs in Old English, just like un is in German. The Bosworth-Toller Dictionary of Old English has examples of the normal and the passive usage of this word, so plenty of Exeter Book riddles end with something like Sara what ich heiße, say what I'm called. So the idea is it describes something and then you have to say what it's called, like a modern riddle. On the other hand, it can be used in an active way. Thadeur hi hartat hranas. They call those animals reindeer. This verb survives into the Middle English period as horten, which follows normal sound changes, and I think it can be used passively and actively, although the examples I've seen have mostly been active by this point. So in the Reeves Tale of the Canterbury Tales, Chaucer tells us, his naam was Horton Simkin. Effectively, his name was called Simkin. In Ian Beat of Inuit, you see, there is an edra that is hot in a Latin aspis. There's a snake that's called aspis in Latin. If this word had survived to modern English, the stem of the word would probably be hote by regular sound change, and given that there are so many examples of it being used actively in Middle English, I'd lean towards suggesting it would probably be used actively in modern English as well. I'm hoten Simon, instead of I hote Simon or I'm hoting Simon. You'll notice this basically does the same job as the word cool in modern English. You have to use this passive construction that involves bringing in another verb. And by the way, when I say passive, I mean that the subject of the sentence, me, is having something done to it. Other people hote me, Simon. I'm not doing anything myself. If you were to use an active construction, I hote Simon, then it's me that's doing something. I can't really give you an active construction in modern English that conveys the same meaning because we don't have this verb anymore. I suppose you could say something like, I have the name Simon, because in that case I'm doing the verb, I'm having the name.